At our wedding, my mother-in-law sneered, "This poor girl can't provide for my daughter. She's just a temporary fix." My bride laughed. I stayed silent. Weeks later, they arrived to a shock. My phone stayed quiet as their world crumbled. Their betrayal freed me. I didn't cry. I acted. Now they regret it, and I'm free. My revenge is their emptiness. So there I was, standing at the altar in my best dress from Target, thinking this was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. The flowers were perfect, the venue was gorgeous, and my soon-to-be wife looked absolutely stunning in her white gown. Everything seemed picture-perfect until her mother decided to drop a bomb right during our reception. Picture it. I'm holding a Bud Light, trying to decompress after the ceremony, when Sarah's mom walks up to me. This woman had been giving me the cold shoulder for months, but I figured she'd at least be civil on our wedding day. Boy, was I wrong. She sidles up to me, fake smile plastered on her face, and goes, "You know, dear, I really hope you can step up and provide for my daughter properly. She's used to a certain lifestyle." Then she pauses, takes a sip of her champagne, and delivers the kicker. "Though between you and me, I think you're just a temporary phase. Sarah will realize soon enough that love doesn't pay the bills." I'm standing there like a deer in headlights, clutching my beer so tight I thought the bottle might crack. What do you even say to that? This is literally my wedding day, and my new mother-in-law is basically telling me I'm not good enough for her daughter. But here's the thing that really got me. Sarah was standing right there, heard every word, and she just laughed. Not an uncomfortable laugh, not a "mom, that's inappropriate" laugh, but a genuine, agreeable laugh, like she thought it was funny. I stayed quiet, didn't make a scene, didn't start drama at my own wedding, just nodded, forced a smile, and walked away to grab another beer. The rest of the reception was a blur of forced smiles and people asking if I was okay. That night, as we're getting ready for bed in our hotel room, I brought it up. "So, about what your mom said today." Sarah just shrugged. "Oh, you know how she is. She's just protective. Don't take it personally. Don't take it personally." Lady, she basically called me a gold-digging loser at my own wedding, and you laughed. How am I supposed to not take that personally? But I let it slide. We were newlyweds. After all, I figured things would get better once we settled into married life. Spoiler alert, they didn't. The first few weeks were okay, don't get me wrong. We had our honeymoon in Cabo, took some cute Instagram photos, did all the newlywed stuff. But slowly I started noticing things. Sarah would make little comments about our apartment, about my job, about how we couldn't afford the things her friends had. "Jessica just got a new BMW, she'd say, scrolling through Facebook. "Her husband works in finance." Or, "Mom thinks we should move to a better neighborhood. She says this area is getting sketchy." Every conversation felt like a subtle dig at my ability to provide. I was working 2 jobs, one at a local nonprofit during the day and bartending at a sports bar on weekends. Not glamorous, but it paid the bills, and I genuinely loved the nonprofit work. Sarah knew this when we got married. We'd talked about our future, our goals, our finances. She said she was proud of the work I did, that making a difference was more important than making bank. Apparently that changed once we had rings on our fingers. The breaking point came about 6 weeks after our wedding. I came home from a particularly rough day at the nonprofit. We'd had to cut funding for one of our youth programs, and I was feeling pretty defeated. All I wanted was to order some pizza, crack open a Corona, and watch Netflix with my wife. Instead, I walked into what looked like a family intervention. Sarah's parents were sitting on our couch, along with her sister and her sister's husband. They all had these serious expressions, like they were about to stage an intervention or something. "We need to talk," Sarah said, not even looking at me. I set down my keys, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and sat down. "Okay, what's up?" Her dad cleared his throat. "We're concerned about your situation here." "My situation?" Sarah's mom jumped in. "Honey, you're a lovely girl, but Sarah deserves better. She deserves security, stability, a real future. Here, we go again." I took a long sip of my beer and waited for the rest. "We think," her sister chimed in, "that maybe you two rushed into things. Maybe you should consider an annulment." An annulment. 6 weeks after our wedding, they wanted us to get an annulment. I looked at Sarah, waiting for her to defend me, to tell her family to back off. Instead, she was staring at her hands, not meeting my eyes. "Sarah?" I said quietly. She finally looked up. "Maybe they have a point. Maybe we did rush things. I don't know if this is what I want anymore." And there it was. The truth laid out like a bad hand in poker. I finished my beer, stood up, and looked around the room at these people who had just collectively decided my marriage was over. "Well," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I guess that settles it then. Update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the support in the comments. I know some of you are wondering what happened next, but trust me, you're not prepared for this plot twist. Let's just say I wasn't as broke as they thought I was, and their assumptions were about to bite them in the rear. The question is, when someone underestimates you completely, do you correct them immediately or let them dig their own grave? Sarah filed for annulment the next week, cited irreconcilable differences and fraudulent misrepresentation of financial status. The fraudulent part really got me. Apparently, I had somehow tricked her into thinking I was poor when I was actually poor. The logic was flawless. Her family was so convinced they were saving Sarah from a life of poverty that they started planning her fresh start. Her mom was already setting her up with some finance bro from their country club. Her dad was talking about helping her get back on her feet financially. Meanwhile, I moved out of our apartment and into a tiny studio across town, bought a used Honda Civic, kept working my 2 jobs, and tried to figure out what the heck had just happened to my life. But here's where things get interesting. See, there was something Sarah and her family didn't know about me. Something I'd never really talked about because honestly, it never seemed relevant. My grandmother had passed away 2 years before Sarah and I got married. Sweet old lady, lived through the Depression, saved every penny she ever made. She left. Me her house, a modest little place in a decent neighborhood, and a pretty substantial savings account. Nothing crazy, but definitely enough to change my life if I wanted it to. I'd never touched the money. The house was rented out to a lovely family, and I just let the rent and savings sit there, earning interest. I was happy with my life, my job, my purpose. The money was there if I ever needed it, but I didn't feel like I needed it. Sarah knew about the house. She knew I owned rental property, but she never asked for details, never seemed interested in the financial side of things. She just assumed it was some little dump that barely broke even. Her family, meanwhile, had painted this picture in their heads of me as this struggling, directionless girl who was going to drag their precious daughter down. They never asked about my assets, my prospects, my plans. They just saw my Target clothes and my bartending job and wrote me off. So when Sarah filed for annulment, I didn't fight it. Didn't hire a lawyer, didn't demand alimony, didn't make a fuss. I just signed the papers and moved on. But I also made a decision. I decided to stop hiding from the life I could have. I quit bartending, used some of my savings to go back to school for my master's degree in social work, moved into my grandmother's house after the tenant's lease was up, started a small nonprofit focused on financial literacy for young women. The funny thing about money is that when you have it, you attract it. My little nonprofit started getting grants, donations, attention. I partnered with some local businesses, got featured in the newspaper, even did a couple of TV interviews about financial empowerment. Sarah and her family, meanwhile, were living their best life. Sarah was dating the finance bro, posting photos of fancy dinners and weekend trips to wine country. Her mom was bragging to anyone who would listen about how they'd saved Sarah from making the biggest mistake of her life. For about 3 months, everything was going great for them. Then Sarah's finance bro turned out to be a total fraud. Ponzi scheme, fake investment portfolios, the whole 9 yards. He got arrested, and Sarah found out she'd been dating a guy who was stealing from retirees to fund his lavish lifestyle. Around the same time, her dad's business hit some rough patches. Something about bad investments and over-leveraging. Her mom had to go back to work for the first time in 20 years. And Sarah? Well, Sarah was suddenly facing the reality that maybe she should have developed some actual job skills instead of just expecting to marry into wealth. She started reaching out to me around month 4. Casual texts at first, then longer messages, then phone calls. "I've been thinking about us," she said during one late-night call. "I think I made a mistake. Update." Okay, so some of you guessed where this was heading, but I promise you the next part is wilder than you think. Sarah's attempts to get back together were just the beginning. Her whole family started reaching out. And let me tell you, watching people eat their words is both satisfying and kind of sad. The real question is, when someone who completely dismissed you suddenly wants back in your life, how do you handle it? I stayed quiet, listening to her go on about how she'd been confused, how her family had pressured her, how she realized what we had was real. "I saw your interview on Channel 7, she continued. "I'm so proud of what you're doing. You're making such a difference in the world." The same work she dismissed as pointless just months earlier was suddenly impressive, now that it came with recognition and respect. "I miss you," she said. "I miss us. Do you think we could try again?" I took a deep breath. "Sarah, you literally told me you didn't think our marriage was what you wanted. Your family called me a temporary phase. You laughed when your mom said I couldn't provide for you." "That was different," she said quickly. "I was scared. I was listening to the wrong people. But I know better now." "Do you, though?" I thought. "Do you really?" Over the next few weeks, the whole family started reaching out. Her mom sent me a Facebook message about how she'd always known I was special and how she'd been worried about Sarah settling down too young. Her dad called to congratulate me on my nonprofit and suggest we grab coffee sometime. Even her sister, who had literally suggested I get an annulment, sent me a text saying she'd always thought I was good for Sarah. It was like living in some alternate universe where none of them had completely dismissed and humiliated me just a few months earlier. The turning point came when Sarah showed up at my house unannounced. I was in my backyard grilling some burgers and enjoying a quiet Saturday afternoon when I heard the doorbell. There she was, standing on my front porch with flowers and tears in her eyes. "Can we talk?" she asked. I let her in, offered her a beer, and listened to her pour her heart out. How she'd made the biggest mistake of her life, how she'd been stupid and shallow, how she wanted to make things right. "I love you," she said. "I've always loved you. I just got caught up in what everyone else thought I should want, instead of what I actually wanted. And you know what? Part of me wanted to believe her. Part of me missed the good times we'd had, missed the woman I'd fallen in love with. But then I remembered that laugh, that moment at our wedding when her mother insulted me and Sarah laughed like it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. "Sarah," I said gently, "if you loved me, really loved me, you wouldn't have needed to lose everything to realize it. You would have stood up for me when your family was tearing me down. You would have defended our marriage when they suggested an annulment." She started crying harder. I know I messed up, but people make mistakes. Can't you forgive me?" I could forgive her. I had forgiven her. But forgiveness doesn't mean going backward. "I forgive you," I told her. "But I'm not the same person I was when we got married. And honestly, I don't think you are either. I think you're scared and looking for stability, and right now I represent that stability. But what happens when someone else comes along who offers more?" She protested, swore things would be different, promised she'd changed, but I'd already changed too. I'd learned to value myself, to not accept being someone's backup plan, to not settle for love that came with conditions. Update. This is probably my final update, and honestly, it's bittersweet. Some of you have been asking about karma and justice, and while I got both, it's not as satisfying as you might think. The real victory was something much smaller and much bigger at the same time. Here's how it all ended, and why I'm actually grateful for everything that happened. I told Sarah I needed time to think, which was a gentle way of saying no without slamming the door completely. She kept calling, texting, showing up at my work and my house. Her family ramped up their efforts too. Suddenly I was invited to birthday parties and family dinners I'd never been welcome at before. But I stayed focused on my life, my work, my actual priorities. My nonprofit was growing. I was making a real difference in women's lives, and I was genuinely happy. Not happy despite being alone, but happy because I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The final closure came about a year later. I was at a coffee shop near my office when Sarah walked in with a guy I didn't recognize. She saw me, and for a moment we just looked at each other across the crowded cafe. She came over to my table. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hey," I replied. "How are you doing?" "Good," she said. "Really good. This is David." She gestured to the guy, who seemed nice enough. We're together now." I smiled. "That's great. I'm happy for you." And I meant it. She looked genuinely content, not desperate or calculating like she had when she was trying to get back together with me. "I wanted to apologize," she said. "For everything. For how I treated you. For how my family treated you. For not appreciating what we had when we had it." "I appreciate that," I said. "Really. You deserved better," she continued. "You deserved someone who saw your worth from the beginning, not someone who had to lose you to realize it." We talked for a few more minutes, caught up on each other's lives. She was working now, had started her own small business, seemed to have learned some valuable lessons about independence and self-worth. When she left, I felt this incredible sense of peace. Not because I'd gotten revenge or proved anything to anyone, but because I'd learned to see my own value. I'd learned that being underestimated is sometimes a gift. It forces you to prove your worth to the only person whose opinion really matters, yourself. Sarah's family had been wrong about me, but they'd done me a favor. Their rejection had pushed me to embrace a life I'd been too comfortable to pursue. Their dismissal had forced me to stop playing small and start living up to my potential. As for them, well, karma has a funny way of working itself out. Sarah's mom still has to work, her dad's business never fully recovered, and her sister got divorced last year. Not because of anything I did, but because life has a way of humbling people who think they're better than everyone else. But that's not really the point of this story. The point is that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the best thing. Sometimes being rejected by people who don't value you is exactly what you need to find people who do. These days, I'm dating someone new, someone who thinks my nonprofit work is amazing, who brags about my achievements to their friends, who never makes me feel like I need to be anything other than exactly who I am. Someone whose family welcomed me from day one, who sees my worth without needing to lose me first. And yeah, I've got money in the bank and a successful organization and a nice house. But more importantly, I've got self-respect. I've got standards. I've got the knowledge that I deserve to be someone's first choice, not their backup plan. Sarah and her family taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. When people show you who they are, believe them the first time. Don't wait for them to prove it again and again. Don't make excuses for people who don't value you. Don't settle for conditional love. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. Sometimes the greatest victory is walking away from people who don't deserve you and building a life so good that their opinion stops mattering. I didn't need to destroy them or make them suffer. Their own choices, their own shallow values, their own inability to see worth beyond dollar signs, that was enough. They destroyed themselves. Me, I just kept building. And that, more than any revenge plot, more than any dramatic confrontation, more than any moment of vindication, that was my real victory. The girl they thought couldn't provide for their daughter turned out to be the one who could provide for herself. And that made all the difference.